I'm Kim McCleary, President and CEO of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us. In these challenging times, we have pivoted our programs online to bring you speakers on current national and international affairs, but we can't do this without the support of our members and audience. If you're enjoying these talks, we'd like to ask you to become a member of the Council or make a contribution by visiting our website at lawac.org after the talk. I'm very pleased to introduce today's program, another partnered event with the LA World Trade Center on how the US, Mexico, and Canada are confronting COVID-19. Stephen Cheung, President and CEO of the LA World Trade Center, will be moderating the program. He will be joined by Ambassador Marcela, Celorio, Consul General of Mexico, and Zaib, Shaikh, Consul General of Canada. Now, Stephen, Marcela, and Zaib, thank you so much for joining us. And Stephen, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to partner with the World Affairs Council again on another panel discussion that's going to address some of the major issues that are happening around the Los Angeles region, around the world. And today we're delighted to be joined by Consul General Zaib Shaikh, as well as Consul General Marcela Celorio from Mexico and from Canada. And we have a lot to talk about, but we only have about 20 minutes to discuss before we go to the Q&A. So why don't we get started right now? As you probably have seen in their background, both Consul Generals represent large diasporas here in the Los Angeles region, and as some of our top trading partners, as well as foreign direct investment partners, Mexico and Canada plays an important role to our existing infrastructure here in Los Angeles, as well as the future of Los Angeles. So we're delighted to get some inputs and some updates in terms of what's happening in Canada and in Mexico, as well as what the future looks like for the three of us. With that said, I would like to ask both Consul Generals to join us on the video screen so that we can start the discussion. Zaib, Marcela, if you can turn on your camera, that would be fantastic. Again, we have a lot of questions to go through. We have on these kind of series, we have a lot of audience participation, and they're very eager to ask you some questions as well. And so with that, let me start. I think a lot of folks are very curious in terms of what's happening around the world with our partners, how they're faring. In the United States, we all know that right now we are the country that's been affected really the most cases. Currently, as a district, we have about 849,000 confirmed cases, and with over 46,000 deaths in the United States. It would be great to get a quick update from each one of you, maybe 2-3 minutes update in terms of what's happening in your country, the overview, and what actions are being taken by your government to help flatten the curve. Perhaps we can start with Consul General Shaikh first. And before we start, I also want to express our condolences to our friends in Canada for the tragic event that happened on April 19th, this Sunday in Nova Scotia. Our hearts go out to our partners and friends, and we're hoping that they're starting to look at the recovery phase and how to build the whole nation as a whole. So they really want to send our condolences in this difficult situation. But with that said, we'll hear a bit more from you about what's happening in Canada.
Thanks so much, Stephen, for your message. Hello to everyone out there. Buenos dias, Ambassador. Nice to see you. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm having a few issues hearing everyone, a bit of a lag, but so here goes. Yeah, we've been dealing with a lot in Canada, obviously all over the world, but this particular week has been incredibly tough. And it's been, it seems, a first quarter of a year talking a lot about words like deaths and figures like that. So I thank you. I thank everyone for their condolences and their well wishes in this time. We want to also recognize our RCMP colleagues and those victims in Nova Scotia and their families. We are with them in so many ways. That being said, of course, this conversation is about something that's happening on a global level, this pandemic. And in terms of how Canada is working with its citizens, its municipal and provincial governments, and the world is very important and is an important moment in time, not only obviously for the world and the healthcare workers, but also for Canada as a government. And I want to reiterate that Canada believes in the idea of good science and good facts helping us make good decisions. And right now we need that. And so what we're seeing and what we're hearing is that, you know, due to the social distancing, of course, and self-isolation principles and practices, including those shutting down of schools and large parts of the economy to deal with the COVID-19, all the provinces across Canada are actually working really hard and working together and aligned with the federal government and with the communities and citizens. And the flattening of the curve, the planking of the curve is actually headed in the right direction and in the right direction, despite, of course, the tragedies that families across the country, and whether they're victims of COVID or victims of what's happening because of COVID through the economy. There are many victims and many people affected negatively, not just health-wise. And so what's important in terms of all that is that our Prime Minister continues to say every morning on his press conferences in both languages, and not only to adults, but also to children out there, which is key. He's messaging to kids who are having to deal with new things as well, that the social distancing will need to stay in place. That's what health practitioners and scientists and the facts seem to be telling us. And it seems to be working, which is why we need to continue it. In the meantime, what can the government do, and what is the government doing? Well, it's working with the provinces and municipalities, as I said. It's also putting together a hugely important and landmark economic support. 52 billion Canadian in direct support to Canadian workers and businesses, plus 55 billion Canadian to meet the liquidity needs of Canadian businesses and households through the tax deferrals. That's a very large impetus, boost, stimulus, support, if you will, landmark in terms of any government having to do that, and of course doing that. But as we keep hearing, this is unprecedented times, and therefore we need to take unprecedented measures. As late as April 17th, Prime Minister Trudeau announced new actions to protect Canadian jobs and provide more support to businesses and organizations dealing with the COVID implications. That is specific support to small, medium-sized businesses, that is specific support to rural communities, and that is specific support and attention to cultural heritage and sports organizations, as well as early-stage companies and young entrepreneurs, which we know help the future. So that's kind of a general overview in what's been happening, and I know there's going to be more specific questions, but I just wanted to share what we believe in and what we think is the right way to go, and what we're seeing. This idea of unity between the provinces and the federal government and the communities is key at this stage, and it's so good to see Canadians united as much as they can be in this social distance and physical distancing world, and a world that is every day teaching us what tragedy and hardship and challenges really mean in the Western world.
Thank you so much, Consul General. For those of us in LA, we know that we have a strong partnership with Mexico as a home to one of the largest diasporas in the world from Mexico, right here in Los Angeles. Our current presence and also our future ties very closely with Mexico. Ambassador Celorio, would love to hear from you what's happening around Mexico right now, as many people around this entire region are very eager to see what's happening in Mexico in terms of the action as well as the current conditions. Ambassador?
Thank you so much, Stephen. My dear colleague Zaib, our heart goes to the people in Canada and especially in Nova Scotia. And you know, how we see things is that this pandemic is like a wave. And if you can attest, in Canada and in the United States, the first confirmed cases were in January. And in Mexico, that started until the end of February. So, and that date, the Mexican government was doing an assessment on how to implement these phases, these three different stages to address the phenomenon. The first is when cases were reported. The second one, the community transmission. And the third one is the epidemiological phase. So in March, we started with phase 2 that has to do with, it was a journey to convey people to keep social distancing, physical distancing. And we call it that as we do it here in Los Angeles with the message of stay home. That was very important. And at the same time, it was very challenging because, you know, in Mexico, we're Latins, and it's very complicated because for us, it's a way of living. If you take a look at the Scandinavian countries that have, you know, a different culture, it seems like it's easier. But for us, the physical contact, and I remember when I was, I did some videos to convey the message to the community here in Los Angeles. And we were talking about, you know, stop kissing each other, stop shaking hands, stop hugging. That was very, very hard for us. And I remember that I saw someone that were kissing each other, and I said, stop kissing. And they felt that, you know, I was in the wrong side because I was being mean to tell them that. But it was very, very challenging. And still in Mexico, that is challenging also. But this stay-at-home measure is going to be in place until May 30th. Every day, the health authorities in Mexico have a press conference in the afternoon at 7 o'clock in the evening, and they provide with all the updates that we have. And the measures that the government has been taking is to address like almost 622,000 million pesos. That is $25 billion for health and economic recovery. And the first one is to strengthen social programs for the benefit of the most vulnerable people. They will include 22 million people with direct support and quick delivery from the public treasury. And those programs will cover 60% of families in Mexico. So that's very important. Also, the investment in domestic investment and employment is still in place, and we are happy to work with the private sector. And in, of course, the Republican austerity that this government has been talking about, and there will be a reduction in higher level salaries up to 25%, among other measures. But the most important ones are that yesterday Banco de Mexico, that is an autonomous institution, announced the injection to the into the economy of 750 million pesos, 1,000 million pesos, and this is almost like 3.3% of the GDP of Mexico. And this seeks to give more liquidity to the market, strengthen the financial system, and the purpose is to stimulate the economy because we're really concerned about the impact. That will be it.
Thank you, thank you. We here in Los Angeles, as you probably have heard, are also going through quite a challenging economic situation right now. Our Small Business Administration has been providing some assistance with the loans, but not everybody received it. And so meanwhile, not knowing what the future is going to look like is becoming very challenging for some of our, especially our small businesses. And as we're looking forward, I think constantly we're hearing a lot of negative news and bad news on TV all the time, and knowing this condition, sometimes it's good to hear some good things that are happening. Would love to hear from both of you whether there are any positive stories that have surfaced amongst this crisis situation within your country to really give us a bit of hope as we're looking in the future what that means for us. Zaib, perhaps you can give us a quick example of something that you might see.
You know, again, it's always very tough to deal with this idea of where is the positive in such hard, challenging times. And yet that is the human spirit, and we feel that is the Canadian spirit as well. This idea of taking challenging times, coming together as a community, and clearly in new ways, because coming together as a community means something completely different in the first quarter of 2020 and likely will for the foreseeable future. And yet, where is the positivity? Well, how does that work? It's how we are responding as Canadians with other Canadians in this from a community level. This idea of fear-mongering and hate-mongering we've had, but now in Canada, we're seeing care-mongering. Folks are calling it care-mongering because it's a sort of initiative that started in Toronto and it really has spread across Canada that aims to uplift people, connect communities, and provide for the needs of at-risk people. There's 35 Facebooks, more than that exist that have to do with this caremongering. There's over 30,000 members between that, and it's growing daily and by the minute, as you know, because online things do grow by the minute, by the second. Quebec, our great province of Quebec, has in some cases been an epicenter, frankly, in terms of the health risks and health challenges of COVID-19 in Canada, but Quebecers wanted the rest of the country to know that it's going to be okay, and so they actually have started a hashtag, Ça va bien LA, is letting folks post that on social media with that hashtag to let folks know that Quebecers are okay and connect them. Who's okay, who's doing well. So that's really good. And they've been hanging rainbows on windows. Of course, just like here in LA and across the US, cities like Vancouver have been taking to their balconies every night and cheering the workers, the healthcare workers and the responders every night at 7 p.m. On the hour as the sun is starting to set. You see that in Canada, and Vancouver's a great place to see the views like that. Even small things like the free library program, which it can be found in thousands of communities across Canada. It's really about donating books, clean books, sanitized so that they can fit into the little pantries and shelves outside. People can walk around and take them and donate books and take books. And this just helps people stay together. These are just small examples and some examples, but we're seeing them across the country, and we're seeing folks really respond in a good way. Ramadan happens to be coming up for Muslims, and there's a whole, our Deputy Prime Minister just this morning announced there's an initiative called A Fast on the 6th, of course, out of Toronto, that's really taking to be things virtual. Have your iftar dinners, stay at home, share your meal, but through your camera or through your posts, and share your recipes. That kind of stuff encourages folks to stay at home and still have some unity at this time.
Marcela, I want to change that question a little bit, also kind of following up from what's happening in Mexico, but also each of these two consulates generals, you guys oversee a vast region, not just Los Angeles itself. Wanted to see a bit in terms of the work that your consulate's doing to support, kind of the local efforts here. What's been happening with your consulate and how you're working, together with some of the local partners for this COVID response?
Yes, first of all, I make sure that all the people that work here at the consulate are safe, and also the community that come here for the citizen services. So we have been following the instructions from the authority. That is very important. We are very active in the media, radio, TV, and social media to convey these messages, to inform, to educate, because there's a lot of, misinformation, and also to listen to the people. And we, the diplomats, are here in a physical duty here at the consulate, physical presence, providing assistance to the emergencies and protection to the people that needs it. So also we have a resilience manual that provides information, options to the people regarding health, mental health, domestic violence, because we can see that that's a terrible issue that we have to address. Also the workers that are in the fields, providing us with all the food, and that's very important for us. And also regarding living conditions. So that's very important. I just want to underline that I am very happy that the Mexican proposal before the United Nations for this international cooperation to guarantee world access, equipment, and medicines to deal with COVID-19 was adopted on Monday. And I am very happy about that, because that guarantees that is fair play.
Yeah. Great. I want to give enough time for our audience member to ask questions, but I want to pivot a little bit. Prior to COVID-19, both Consul Generals and I were on 2 different panels talking about the USMCA agreement and what the future means for these 3 countries with the trade agreement moving forward. That seemed like a million years ago now, since we had that last conversation, and things have obviously changed quite a lot. In the midst of the COVID-19 crisis and of course the quarantine that's affecting all of us, a lot of folks are now talking about potentially what we should be doing with the agreement. Should we delay it? What is the best course of action? Wanted to get your take in terms of the discussion that's happening around your country in terms of their response and their thinking about USMCA. Zaib, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that does seem like a really long time ago, and we were so in the thick of it, and it was such a positive discussion, and then it seems like that discussion is on pause, and yet, of course, nothing is on pause and can be on pause really when it comes to a major agreement like USMCA, and I think that all 3 countries are really committed to USMCA, and as fact, on April 2nd, Canada notified both US and Mexico of its readiness to bring USMCA into effect. And what that means is that actually under the terms of the agreement, when the last notification comes through, following that, the 3rd month following that last notification, NAFTA remains in place, but entry will start. You know what I mean? It's that the trigger has been set and triggered. All the notifications have been done, and so the focus, of course, of the government is on the health and safety of Canadians. I can, like the ambassador was saying here, our focus is on our folks here that work with us here at the consulate. So is the government's prime concern the health of Canadians, but our prime concern right after that is actually the economic well-being of Canadians, and USMCA is integral to that, as we're seeing. And so Canada is going to, of course, continue to lead efforts to complete that important trilateral work, and we will be ready to do business and open for business, and we can make it work virtually and digitally, I'm sure.
Marcela?
Yes, in the same line as Zaib just said, I think that is very important that we have to be aware that trade keeps on going. And even though we agreed, Canada, Mexico, and the United States to close the border to non-essential crossing, I think trade is still there. And I just talked to my colleagues at the border and all the companies, and they're still, moving, and that's very, very important. And also, I see this as an opportunity. I think that when the supply chain is under menace, I think that we have the people, we have the resources, and if we really think about an industrial policy that we can craft in the North American region, I think that we can be pretty successful.
That's a very good point. We've been working with a lot of our partners, especially domestic partners that are really looking at changing their supply chain, knowing the vulnerabilities of depending on, especially international trade when these kind of issues arise. And a lot of them are talking about how do they bring that production, at least a portion of it, if not a majority of it, back to the North American kind of region. So I think this gives us a huge advantage moving forward in the future, and also utilizing USMCA as a way to really help us look at the recovery phase. Lots to talk about, but I want to at this point open it up for discussion with our audience member. Jessica is on the from World Affairs Council, has been tracking some of these questions that are going through, so I'm going to open it up. Jessica, would you like to facilitate some of these questions that are coming through?
Sure. Thank you so much, Stephen. So the first question is, what is the condition of the hospitals in Canada and Mexico? Do they have enough supplies? They didn't say specifically, so they asked about both countries. So if you guys both want to give a quick update, that would be great.
Okay, sure. I'll just say that we continue to monitor that. Of course, it's but what's going to help the situation in those facilities is actually how much people are attentive to and following those stay-at-home and shelter-in-place orders to flatten and plank the curve. And as I said earlier, we're actually seeing a real positive on that, as positive as you can be in this time, of course. But we're seeing that actually we can manage in places where you would want to have managing your numbers. We're seeing that on the right side of things rather than on the negative side. Of course, it continues to be a challenging situation, but all reports from Canada is that we're managing it the best we can, and of course encouraging, and in some cases downright, as the ambassador even said, telling folks to stop doing what they're doing if they're not social or physical distancing.
Well, in Mexico, you know, it's very important the alliance that we have the public sector with the private sector. So all the private hospitals open up their doors so they can get the patients, and so we can have room in other hospitals. So this is a very, it's a fantastic alliance, and we can see the support of all the community.
Thank you. For Consul General Shaikh, what has the impact of the US-Canada border being closed to all but essential business and trade been on Canada's economy? How are those who live in close proximity with their American neighbors faring?
Well, you know, that's a very good question. This moment in time has challenged, I think, countries to look at each other and themselves about, are they really the unified relations, friends, are they really that? And in fact, it continues to be that Canada and the US, and of course Mexico, but in this question, for Canada and the US to remain friends, partners, and allies, that is key at this time in a world where we are being asked to really consider what each country is doing. And we're seeing that friendship, partnership, and alliance is strong. Of course, we've had some border restrictions, if you will, in terms of essential and non-essential business travel. Those were first implemented March 21st by the two countries, and they've been extended. As of April 18th, they've been extended for another 30 days. But we know that both countries have an incredible supply chain relationship for essential medical equipment, whether it's gloves, ventilators, testing kits, and masks. And that relationship that positive trading relationship has translated into this medical supplies conversation. It's complex, it's integrated, it's reciprocal. So it's in both countries' best interest that we allow these supplies to move back and forth. We were very heartened to see that off the top that the idea of the U.S. not exporting things, especially when it came to PPE type equipment, that Canada was later exempt from that. And that was a key moment, I think, in time that tells Canada, the U.S., and the rest of the world that this is a real unified approach. We continue to be in close contact as governments, of course, and we continue to further and fine-tunes the details. I think, you know, there are always large statements that have to be made right off the top, and then the detailed work between the two countries and their representatives begins so that we can help communicate that to our citizens and our American friends and neighbors so that they can continue to do business together. So there is always a lag time, I'll be honest, in terms of the big, large kind of policy statement that gets made, and then, oh, really, what does that mean? How is that impacting me? And questions like this really help us get better frame to the answers. So it's really important to keep this dialogue open about how good we are at helping each other sort of, achieve what we need to be successful in this really challenging time.
Thank you. And Ambassador Celorio, this is kind of a similar question, but can you comment on how the U.S. immigration policies are affecting the COVID situation and perhaps how your consulate is having to respond right now?
Yes, this is a very important question, and I want to underline that we are very respectful about the U.S. policies towards migration. Just recently, White House decided to put a pause in all these applications regarding permanent status that are seeking permanent status, but this won't affect the migrant workers. And I want to underline also that because of the migrant workers, the economy is now being sustained, not just in the fields, but also in the packing, industries and the services. So I think that this is a moment to recognize all the work that migrant workers are doing and to, show gratitude for them. And I'm aware also that the program H2A is expanding because the government is recognizing that they need these people.
Thank you. This is for both of you. As you may have heard, there are protests in the U.S. to lift the stay-at-home orders. Are you experiencing any pushback from the public in regards to the stay-at-home orders put in place in your country? So, Zaib, if you want to start.
We're a human race, and we are always in many ways agreeing with things, and we also have instincts that make it seem that we want to always be, wait a second, is this really what should be happening? And that's, Canadians are entitled to that. As long as they are following the law, the rule of law, they are entitled to have their viewpoints and share those viewpoints with the rest of the country. But I'll be honest, in terms of the reports that we're hearing, the real detailed reports, these kinds of protests or differences of opinions of what matters in terms of the health and welfare of communities across the country, but also, frankly, across the world, is that these protests, at least out of Canada and, frankly, even in our territory, as I'm seeing, is what we represent here in the Southwest US, are actually more minimal than they're being reported overall. The numbers, when you look at the numbers, they're actually very limited to the small hundreds. That's not to say that we can't take that seriously and we can't make sure that there's still health and welfare being maintained even within those protests, but it's to say that there isn't a kind of wave of a difference of opinion right now. Actually, the wave of opinion is that we're all doing the right thing and we need to continue to do it for the next foreseeable future so we can get back to track and hit those second, third, and fourth quarters and really see the economic recovery and then moving on to the stability and beyond that.
On that point, I would like to say that Mexico is like moving on the opposite direction, because at the beginning, some sectors of the population, they stayed home and they have been there for more than a month at home. But some others, they're still on the streets and they didn't realize that this was a crisis and that this was really happening. So now they are realizing that this is true and this is real. So now people are, taking all the measures possible to stay home. And for me, it was like conveying the message to the community, hey, tell your friends and family in Mexico that this is real and it's coming. As I said, this wave is gonna get us. So now in Mexico, people are more conscious and they are not arguing at all. So they are taking, these instructions seriously and complying with them.
Thank you. And this one is again for both of you. This is a discussion on the trilateral partnership between the US, Mexico, and Canada. Yet given the circumstances with COVID-19, how will this impact the future foreign direct investments of each country to China? Will there be greater regional investments from now on? Zaib, why don't you go ahead and start?
I think that it's frankly too early to speak in definitive terms. At this stage, I think each nation and country, and where there is valued and good partnership already, we're going back to the basics, if you will, the basics of checking in with ourselves. Are we okay? Checking in with each other. That idea of what happens, what happens when there's crises. The advice is to make sure you and the people around you immediately are okay and you're taking care of each other, because if you are, then you can start helping the others. That's kind of how it has to work. And I think right now, the idea is that Canada is checking in with itself, with its provincial partners, with its citizens, and then its most immediate partners, geographically and economically speaking, that's the US and Mexico. And so right now, the ideas of where trade lies and what's happening, of course, our concern is global. But I think when it comes to global issues, our priorities are around health and welfare and the economy of health and welfare, and what are we doing, whether it's with the World Health Organization, and how are we helping those, and can we help those, and how can we help those impacted countries that might have it much worse off than frankly even Canada does in this global pandemic. And then next steps after that, of course, as I said, when we get into the next quarters, when we get into some stability and some ideas of recovery, which is very much around the corner. That's the other key thing that we're hearing. Science is telling us if we follow these guidelines, it is around the corner. It will be in stages. It will, of course, take its time. But this idea of moving beyond where we are right now, it is around the corner. We just have to be patient. And then, of course, everything is back on the table. And Canada will never shy away, and has never, and is not shying away now, from making sure its agreements, its friendship, its alliances, whether they're trade or otherwise, are intact, integrated, and working positively. So whether it's China, whether it's any country in the world where we have good relationships, where we have them, we will continue them. Where there are challenges, we'll continue to work on those challenges. And we know that there are, even when you describe one country's relationship with another, you can have really positive aspects of that relationship and really challenging aspects of that relationship. And we'll have to address both of those.
I agree with Zaib, and this pandemic showed and made us realize, if we haven't noticed, that we are so tied to each other and we depend on each other. So yes, talking about the region is important, but of course the worldwide is even more important. But I can see that the North American region really has an opportunity here. And we have to take care of our populations, and also if we can envision and design, as I mentioned before, an industrial policy that can be, implemented in these three countries, and Mexico with this powerful in manufacturing. Some other aerospace, and what else we could say, medical devices, and automotive industry. So I think that there is a big opportunity for us.
Thank you. Again, this would be for both of you, and Ambassador Celorio, I'll start with you on this one. How will cross-border protocols in both directions be agreed upon, enforced, and effectively managed for approved travelers?
The protocols at the border?
Yes.
So what we're seeing is that just people that came to work are allowed to go back and forth with no problem at all. And also for health reasons, you can travel back and forth. But just tourism is the one. Leisure purposes to travel are the ones that have been impacted. But so far in Mexico, we are allowing people to come in with no restrictions. And just someone went this past weekend to Tijuana and came to do some shopping, and there was no problem at all. So it is impacted, but not as we figure it out, you know.
Thank you. And then I'll just, sorry, has Mexico, Canada, and the USA converted auto industry that is dormant to produce N95 masks and other PPE or ventilators? I guess, Marcela, this would probably be more for you. So
Yes.
have you seen industries convert to provide and produce those items?
You understand? Yes, I have some information here that I can see here. ¿Dónde está haciéndose? Here, my colleagues are telling me that just we got some information that we are starting to produce some ventilators in Guanajuato, in Querétaro. So, ¿dónde está? Oh, yes. So, serial production of a new ventilator model designed in Mexico will begin on May this year in the city of Querétaro. The weekly production is estimated to be 500 ventilators, and those will be available from May 15. So I think that, as I said, there are a lot of opportunities, and Mexico is moving.
Fantastic. Consul General Shaikh, in times of social distancing where the consumption economy is dramatically slowed down, how is Canada encouraging research and development and entrepreneurship to hit the ground running once both manufacturing and shopping will accelerate again?
Well, I can, as I outlined before, our government is actually taking unprecedented measures in an unprecedented time, and supplying, whether it's through the tax deferrals and liquidity needs of Canadians, or whether it's the direct stimulus package, it's integral to get the word out there and start the programs and start getting the feedback, because it's always, again, we go back to, I don't mean to kind of make it seem so simplistic, but the only way to deal with things, in large things, is kind of to break it down. And when you first put out a stimulus package or put out some statements, then immediately you're always getting feedback. This is not enough. This is enough. I need more. Have you thought about this? What about these unintended consequences? And then the work really comes down to, how do you manage that conversation, and how do you manage putting that stuff out there and taking it in? And consulates across the world, whether it's our Trade Commissioner Services Network or whether it's our consulate here, we are in fact doing our own work in terms of what the supply chain research is, what's needed, where are things going, how are the 2 countries and 3 countries in terms of our shared intelligence about how we're all dealing with this economically, in terms of our stimulus packages, and how are they affecting people. This kind of conversation and research continues on. Just today, I approved 2 or 3 reports on supply chain research that we're sending back to HQ, and so, all to say that the government is very not only concerned, but sees this moment in time and recovery and stability as a priority. And it's asked us, as you know, we are not on normal business in that way. We are on essential business, as the ambassador was saying, in terms of consular. And then our business is about making sure we are talking about the supply chains on PPE equipment, and then on the supply chains of what kind of whether it's VC, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's all sectors, what's happening, what's the state of play. And I will be honest, although it can seem positive, the state of play is that around 90% of a lot of business is paused or shutting down or slowed down, whether it's even airlines. You know, our national carriers have shut down until May 22nd flights. So even though border restrictions and essential travel may be happening, you probably now have to take a land border. So it is the trucks that are passing and the buses. The air travel is not. You know, those folks are going to have to figure out a different way, at least for the next 4 weeks. So it's an incredibly complicated time, and yet I want to say that I think that our three countries are doing not only our best, but are actually doing it as much as we can together, and making things happen out there in this incredibly tentative moment in economic history, I think.
Thank you so much. Can you comment on the decision by President Trump to cut funding to the WHO and the impact on Mexico and Canada and the role of WHO in your respective countries? Ambassador, do you want to start on that one?
I'm going to pass it to Zaib.
That sounds good.
Sure. You know, every government, as we've always said, is entitled to have their relationship with international organizations as they wish. It's a sovereign nation's, you know, right, frankly. Our nation has a very engaged relationship with the World Health Organization. Recently, we have not only provided $2 million to help vulnerable countries, but we've also provided $50 million in international assistance to WHO. And other partners for potential bilateral support for developing countries having to meet the response of COVID-19. This is clear to us that World Health Organization is going to be, at least for Canada, a key partner in disseminating recovery, stability, and well-being, not only in developing countries, but likely across the world, because it really, we're all in this together, isn't just a hashtag, it isn't just some sort of catchphrase, it really is essential. We are all going to move forward or not together, and Canada is committed to organizations like the World Health Organization and others that are trying to do the good work that is based on science, facts, and actual goodwill in positivity towards what medical needs are not only necessary from developing nations, but all nations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you know, I would like to say that from my point of view, I think that this is a very good opportunity to make an assessment of the importance of the international organizations and also the responsibility and the accountability of the countries that are members of these organizations. I think that this is very important, that we should be aware that what is the level of responsibility of each country. And I think that this is like, you know, an earthquake to shake these organizations and to identify what is working, what is not working, and what is the responsibility of each member.
Thank you. How are your consulates adapting to the current situation? Are all of your employees working remotely, and do you have sections that remain open?
You want me to answer that?
Please. Yes. You take that one, Ambassador, and I'll follow up.
A bit of humor. So we're throwing. Well, we're adapting. Like now, we're doing this seminar. I don't know if I have to look up, down, to the middle, but we are, as I said, all the diplomats are working here inside. And the local employees are answering a call center, and we're providing information, and we're assisting, protecting, and we're just adapting. We're using social media. Zaib is very good at that, entertainment. So so it's the best way to convey the message and to transmit them that they are not alone and that we are here to help.
Thank you.
The same for us. Thank you, Ambassador. For us, you know, we're down to we're the second largest consulate in the U.S. for Canada after New York and obviously the embassy. And so we have a fairly large staff that is just sort of through not only LA, but in San Diego as well. And so where we can, a lot of our business team and our diplomacy team, yes, we are teleworking. But there are also key consular staff supporting at the office, key immigration staff here that are absolutely supporting the work that needs, and those are appointment only now, unfortunately. A lot of stuff is happening through the phone and online, but there needs sometimes to be human interaction in transferring, you know, sort of legal documents and travel documents. And there's also been a lot of Canadians coming into our ports actually in this territory trying to get home from whether it's cruise ships or other things, and we've had to support those. And we've also been able to take a whole of California approach, and I'm very proud of our team that we were able to help our San Francisco consulates in when cruise ships were coming into the port there, and be able to help them. And so, you know, it's important to be open right now, but it's also important to be sort of managing your business. And I come into the office once a week. I'm speaking to you today from the office to make sure that our team feels good there, but also have to follow, you know, that people follow what we're saying, and good culture leadership starts with the folks that are put in those positions. And so as consul generals or ambassadors or presidents of organizations, you know, I think we're all doing our best to lead, and where it counts to be there, but where it counts to be at home, stay at home and Zoom in or video in.
Thank you so much. And I know we have so many questions and we're running out of time, but on your question of leadership, this will be our final question. This crisis has created opportunities for visionary leadership. Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, for example. What leaders, either from North America or globally, have inspired the panelists? So Stephen, this includes you on this one. So any leaders that you've seen that are inspiring you? I don't know, who wants to start?
Well, if I may, or who, I don't know.
Please.
Go ahead.
I really want to thank, you know, I am a foreigner here, I'm a diplomat, and I have to respect the law and the authorities here in the United States. And I really want to thank the leadership of Mayor Garcetti and the Governor Newsom. We feel safe, we feel confident, we feel supported, and I think that they have been doing a great job.
I'm going to take a moment to echo what the ambassador said. When you have reports, you know, where the state that you're in is getting A-level grades and approval, or at least commitment to the policies coming out at about 90–95%, in a very challenging, you know, global pandemic, unprecedented times, that speaks to the community's trust, but also the leadership's trust and ability to get trust and to give trust and to gain it. And so that is being seen in so many ways from our governor here, as well as Mayor Garcetti. We're seeing that, and we as a consulate, I think we're on the same page here, Ambassador. I know in terms of, we feel a real kinship to the community that we live in as guests, frankly. And this community is keeping us safe, and we're lucky to be here. And while we may miss our home, we're incredibly grateful to the state and the city and the county for being so ahead of the game as much as they could be, and trying to work hard and contain and mitigate. Of course, there's flashpoints, and we've got a big, you know, there's a big population, but they're doing amazing work. And also to the folks like you, leadership can show itself. It doesn't have to be with folks who are large nations. It's leaders who are leading small teams, large teams. If you're telling people to stay at home, and that's what their work is this week, that's great leadership. Being able to pivot and take presentations into this kind of format and get us to talk to all the folks that are, there's, you know, over hundreds of people on this, that's leadership, I think. And I think we have to that at these times, because it's not just about the big stuff that matters. Little stuff really counts in this day and age right now.
I'll jump in very quickly. I'm a bit biased because I used to work for Mayor Garcetti, so of course I'm going to say he's been fantastic. But truthfully, this is a really tough position for him to be in, to lead one of the largest metropolis in the nation, and to take such aggressive measure that are politically can be a bit challenging. But he's looking out for the best interests in terms of the health and safety of our community first, and that's really important. And also, I want to also say that Mayor of San Francisco, London Breed, she was the first to basically start announcing Safer at Home initiative to push the nation to that that level as well before, again, everybody started adopting it. To take that kind of political risk and that kind of courage needs to be applauded. On an international level, I think Chancellor Merkel from Germany has shown how utilizing science and her background as a PhD in physics, really being able to explain, if we don't do the Safer at Home initiative and the quarantine, the exponential growth that can happen, and the way that it's been controlled fairly effectively in Germany. It's a really good example for us to look at. And I think here locally in Los Angeles, besides the mayor's office, we have to also look at the county supervisors that oversee all of LA County. The 5 supervisors are constantly behind the scenes pushing this to move forward. But it's actually the Department of Health that's been run by the county of Los Angeles with the 5 supervisors as the lead to push us forward. Those are the unsung hero that I think we need to also recognize. So I think there are many heroes to look at and many folks that we should look up to. I think in the time of crisis, we're going to see a lot more of these leaders emerging.
Thank you so much, all of you. I really appreciate you being on the talk today and taking times out of your, I'm sure, very busy and demanding schedules. I think we're going to toss it back to Kim, so thank you.
Thank you all. That was such an informative conversation, and thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to all of our viewers for joining us. Now, tomorrow, our program will feature politics professor Dan Schnur and his new weekly series called Politics in the Time of Coronavirus. His topics this week are the Great Reopening Debate, the new isolationism, and can Biden motivate the Democratic base? We have 3 live streams next week, including a panel of global health experts addressing what we can expect from the next phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, a partnered program again with the LA World Trade Center on how LA tech and manufacturing are pivoting their businesses to protect people, and our new weekly Politics in the Time of Coronavirus series. We also have provided you with a handout that's attached to your control panel listing all of our upcoming programs for your convenience. Please, all of you, stay safe, stay informed, and see you soon. Thank you so much.